We're back here at Birmingham View, and we are going green because we're talking about water. Water that you drink, water that you use to cook with, water that you recreate in if you're a canoer or you're a swimmer. Somebody's looking out for that water and making sure it's clean and it's healthy for you to drink and it's healthy for you to get in. And so we have someone here. The first time we've got a real green person, I guess if you want to call it that, here in Birmingham View studio to talk about why it's important to keep our rivers clean. So we have Mr. Charlie Scribner, who is the executive director of the Black Warrior Riverkeeper. So what does a Riverkeeper do, Mr. Riverkeeper?
Well, locally, we have an office in Birmingham, but we are actually, our mission is to protect and restore the Black Warrior River and its tributaries. And so that watershed, in other words, the land area that drains to the Black Warrior River, includes parts of 17 counties, all in Alabama. So our office is here, but we patrol for pollution sources throughout the 17 county area, and then when necessary we'll follow up and devise solutions to those pollution problems.
So a lot of the creeks and the rivers that flow through Birmingham actually flow into the Black Warrior River. That's on the western edge of the county, is that right?
That's correct. And so there's
like
creeks,
Village Creek
exactly.
and Valley Creek and all those creeks. Those are the ones that go
5 Mile Creek.
5 Mile Creek, the creek in Avondale. I think there was company, was it McWayne, that got in trouble. There's a lot of people.
That's correct.
Dumping.
They just settled the case with the federal government. But Avondale Creek flows into Village Creek, so you know your local creeks pretty well. But
but being a reporter, I went to a lot of them when they flooded, and poor residents that got put out. So yeah, I do know those. And Village Creek in particular was a big problem.
And you know, Village Creek used to be Birmingham's original drinking water supply,
really?
But it became too polluted for that use. And I think that people that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So we're trying to protect the current drinking water supplies. For example, downtown Birmingham gets a lot of its water from the Black Warrior watershed. But we're also protecting the river and its tributaries, like you said, for recreation and for the wildlife habitat. Alabama is blessed with being #1 in freshwater biodiversity in America, which means we've got more species of snails, mussels, fish, turtles.
Our former mayor used to talk about that all the time. About, we're the best kept secret. We got more species of turtles and all those kinds of things. This is because those waterways are clean.
That's correct. We're not just #1 in football. So. But what a riverkeeper does is like I said, we patrol for major sources of pollution to those waterways throughout the 17 counties, and we will contact violators when we find a significant and ongoing problem.
Okay, now that goes back to why a riverkeeper, because I thought we had ADEM, the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, if I'm right.
That's correct.
And that's their job to look out to make sure that the waterways are protected. And so why do you? Is this like another layer of bureaucracy, or what do you?
No, they are a government agency, and we are a nonprofit citizen group. And essentially, it is their job to enforce environmental laws. Unfortunately, we've found time and time again that they have been neglectful in their enforcement role.
So how do you know that?
We know that because we actually review pollution reports from various facilities, whether they're government or privately owned, and we will find hundreds and sometimes thousands of violations that they've reported to ADEM without any penalties, or really without any follow-up other than a letter saying, we'll try better next time, guys. So what we do is we can step in if we have local representation, i.e. members, in an area that's being polluted, and we can actually use the citizen lawsuit provisions of the Clean Water Act to enforce environmental laws when the government isn't.
So then what constitutes a violation?
Well, there are a number of different permits that different facilities receive that outline how much of a given pollutant they're allowed to discharge on a monthly or daily basis.
Okay, so we're talking about sewage, we're talking about grease, we're talking about, what are we talking about?
It depends on the facility, but yes, all of the above and others. Heavy metals. A coal mine we'd be looking at, heavy metals like iron and manganese. A sewage treatment plant, obviously, we'd be looking for, we don't need to get into details.
Please don't.
On construction sites, we'd be largely looking at dirt getting in sedimentation, getting into the water. So it depends.
But I mean, is it a bad thing? I mean, how do you you've got to have industry, you've got to have things like that, but how do you balance the two in terms?
We're certainly not anti-industry. I want the economy to be strong. The thing is, there are many government and privately owned industries and facilities in the state that are not violating environmental laws. And I don't actually think it's fair to them when their competitors or their neighbors are violating those laws. It's like being in a race with someone who's on steroids and you're not. So, these people are cutting corners when they're violating the law, and they're putting the pollution burden on the public as well as, the private property of their neighbors.
So how is that endangering our health? And I mean, we're not saying that the water is bad here in Birmingham.
Correct.
Not necessarily, because we've got award-winning quality water, if you want to, at the Birmingham Water Works. But what is it specifically that you do? I guess do people live along these rivers, or is it?
They do.
And so then you're protecting those people as well. And how far does your patrol go, I guess, in terms of...
The rivers...
I know it's 17 counties.
Right. The river's approximately 300 miles long. So it starts in the Sipsey Wilderness, Bankhead National Forest in Winston County, and then the Mulberry Fork's in Coleman County, and the Locust Fork is in Blount County. And those three rivers combine about 30 miles west of Birmingham to the Black Warrior proper, which then goes down through Tuscaloosa, which means Black Warrior in Choctaw, actually. And then it flows down to Demopolis, where it combines with the Tom Bigby River and heads to Mobile Bay. So our patrol area ends at Demopolis.
And so you brought something with you to show us kind of what this nasty stuff looks like.
Absolutely. I brought a pollution sample, and this kind of illustrates part of what we do. We actually employ a full-time staff riverkeeper named Nelson Brook, and his title is Riverkeeper. And so he goes out in our patrol boat as well as our patrol canoe, and sometimes on foot, and collects samples like this, and we bring it to a laboratory. Yeah, you can grab that. It's not toxic. This is a sample of oil and grease, which was a violation of the Clean Water Act, but I purposely didn't bring something in here that would be dangerous for you to hold.
Oh, nasty. Okay,
it was bad for the fish, though. We got reports of fish kills in that area. This was from a facility in Moundville called Alabama Biodiesel. And we're not anti-industry, and we're certainly not anti-green industry. They were creating an alternative fuel. The problem was they hadn't even applied for a permit with ADEM to discharge anything, and they were already discharging the byproducts of their operations, in other words, oil and grease, right into the river. And we've got members around Moundville. Also, it's a famous archaeological park that thousands of people visit every year. And people were calling us up saying, we're seeing oil on the river, we're seeing grease. So this helps illustrate an example of what we might do. We went in there, Nelson collected these samples, brought them to a lab in town, who analyzed them, get the exact levels of pollutants in there, and then we call the violators and we say, we've got the evidence of pollution here, what are you going to do about it? About half the time, a violator will bring us to the table and talk about how they're fixing the problem, and we're happy that way because we don't profit off our litigation anyway.
You do bring lawsuits.
We do, but we're a nonprofit organization, so at the end of the day, we're just trying to protect the river. If a lawsuit's necessary in order to do that, then that's what we'll pursue.
So you got a lot of friends, huh?
Well, sometimes we do make enemies because people don't want to work with us, but we just want to help the public out. There are about 1 million people living in the Black Warrior watershed, and there's hundreds of thousands of people in Birmingham, for example, that get drinking water from it. People out there recreating on it, and we don't apologize for helping them out. So
you talked about where did this organization come from in terms of its origin originally, and how did you come to Birmingham?
Good question. The reason why there's a Riverkeeper in Birmingham is kind of a long story, but I'll make it short.
Thank you.
Back in the 1960s, the Hudson River was terribly polluted by just about any industry you could name.
And that's the Hudson River in
New York State. And a group of fishermen got together, and they were talking about how they could fix the problem, because just like in Alabama today, in the New York State government, they weren't actually enforcing the environmental laws that were being violated and causing the pollution. So these fishermen set up the first Riverkeeper organization. They had a sports writer from Sports Illustrated among their ranks, and these were all patriotic ex-military veterans, commercial fishermen, and they set up Riverkeeper. They started suing the industries up and down the Hudson.
There must have been a lot of them, if it's in New York.
There were quite a few.
Yeah.
And they did such a good job of cleaning up the Hudson, which is much more swimmable and just approachable than it was back then, that people on other waterways were reading about them in the New York Times and whatnot and saying, how do we get this on our river? How do we have a soundkeeper or a baykeeper or a riverkeeper? And so it went from Long Island Sound, and then there was one in San Francisco Bay, and then it came to Atlanta with Upper Chattahoochee Riverkeeper.
Yeah.
In 2001, a young professional in Birmingham named David Whiteside started Black Warrior Riverkeeper because his godfather was Bobby Kennedy Jr., who was the attorney for the Hudson Riverkeeper. The reason why Bobby was his godfather was because David's great uncle was Judge Frank M. Johnson, who was the federal judge that legally desegregated Alabama.
Sure did.
So Bobby had been studying about Frank Johnson and the civil rights movement while he was in college. And when he came down here to do some interviews, David was born. This was the very late 70s. And so Bobby became his godfather, tutored him about the Waterkeeper movement, and now we have Riverkeepers not only in Alabama, but on every continent in the world, except for Antarctica.
They don't think they need anything.
Right, right. I mean, that's a different issue.
So if somebody wants to report anything to you guys, is there a number that people to call?
Yes, they can call 205-458-0095, and they can also report pollution on the website, which is blackwarriorriver.org.
Okay. We don't want to get anybody in trouble, but, you know, if something happens, you know, Charlie and his group are here to watch out for us, so we appreciate you guys, what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
So we'll be right back after this short little break.